Imagine, for a moment, a world without the modern luxuries we take for granted. No skyscrapers, no paved roads, and no digital currency. Now, look closer at a small, sun-drenched settlement between two great rivers. In the hands of a Sumerian laborer is a large clay bowl filled with a thick, cloudy, bubbling liquid. This isn't just a refreshment, it is his paycheck, his nutrition, and his connection to the gods. Many believe that the invention of the wheel or the discovery of fire were the greatest milestones of humanity, but what if I told you that the very foundation of human civilization, the reason we stopped wandering as nomads and started building cities, was actually a craving for a cold, fermented beverage? Today, we are diving deep into the sands of time to uncover the liquid gold of Mesopotamia. This is the story of how beer didn't just accompany history, it created it. To understand the birth of beer, we must travel back over 6,000 years to the cradle of civilization Mesopotamia. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now modern-day Iraq, this was a land of extremes. The soil was incredibly fertile due to the seasonal flooding of the rivers, yet the environment was harsh and unpredictable. It was here that the Sumerians, and later the Akkadians and Babylonians, performed a miracle. They transitioned from the Paleolithic lifestyle of hunting and gathering to the Neolithic lifestyle of settled agriculture. But why? For decades, historians assumed it was the need for a stable bread supply. However, a fascinating and controversial theory, often called the beer before bread hypothesis, suggests otherwise. Scholars like Solomon Katz argue that the desire to produce fermented beverages, which were safer to drink than the often contaminated river water and provided a euphoric social lubricant, was the primary incentive for ancient humans to settle down and systematically cultivate wild grains like barley and emmer. The evidence for this liquid revolution isn't just speculative, it is etched into the very stones and clay of the earth. Archaeologists working at sites like Godin Tepe in the Zagros Mountains have unearthed ceramic jars dating back to 3,500 BCE. Using modern chemical analysis, specifically gas chromatography, scientists discovered traces of calcium oxalate on the interior of these vessels. This substance, known to brewers as beer stone, is a byproduct of the brewing process. But the physical residue is only half the story. The Sumerians were the first to develop a writing system, cuneiform, and among their earliest records are detailed accounts of grain distributions for brewing. One of the most famous artifacts is the Blue Monument, a stone tablet that depicts a priestess overseeing the preparation of grain. We see the symbol for kash, the Sumerian word for beer, appearing more frequently in economic tablets than almost any other commodity. It was the oil of the ancient world, powering the economy and the workforce. But how did they actually make it? Without the benefit of thermometers, stainless steel tanks, or commercial yeast packets, the Mesopotamians developed a sophisticated brewing technique that would impress any modern craft brewer. At the heart of this process was bapir, or beer bread. This wasn't bread intended for eating, it was a hard, twice-baked loaf made from sprouted barley flour that could be stored for long periods without spoiling. When it was time to brew, the bapir was crumbled into large clay vats of water and mixed with dates or honey for added sugar and flavor. The fermentation happened naturally. Because the air of Mesopotamia was thick with wild yeast, the sugary mash would begin to bubble and ferment almost immediately. This process was considered so miraculous that it was placed under the protection of a deity, Ninkasi, the goddess of beer. In a society where most professional brewers were women, Ninkasi was their patron. Around 1800 BCE, an anonymous scribe recorded the Hymn to Ninkasi. On the surface, it is a beautiful work of religious poetry, but look closer and you'll realize it is actually the world's oldest beer recipe set to music. The hymn describes the goddess handling the dough with a big shovel, mixing the bapir with sweet aromatics, and watering the malt covered with earth. It describes the filtering process through a reed mat and the final product flowing into the collector vat, like the onslaught of the Tigris and Euphrates. This was a living beverage, thick, nutritious, and full of active yeast and B vitamins. In an era where malnutrition was a constant threat, Beer was quite literally liquid bread that kept the population alive. One of the most distinctive aspects of Mesopotamian beer culture was how it was consumed. If you were to walk into a Sumerian tavern, yes, they had taverns called lustra, you wouldn't see people clinking glasses. Instead, you would see groups of people sitting around a large communal pot, each holding a long, hollow reed straw. These straws weren't just for fashion, they were functional. Because ancient beer was unfiltered, a layer of spent grain and husks would float on the top. The straw allowed the drinker to pull the clear, potent liquid from the bottom of the vat. This created a deeply communal experience. Drinking was an act of sharing, a sign of trust, and a way to bond with one's neighbors. Whether you were a king or a commoner, the beer in that pot was the great equalizer. But the influence of beer went far beyond the tavern walls. It was the literal fuel of the Mesopotamian economy. In a world before minted coins, beer was used as currency. We have found ration lists from the city of Uruk, showing that workers were paid in daily measures of beer. A standard laborer might receive 2 liters a day, while a high-ranking official could receive up to 5 liters. This wasn't just about getting the workers tipsy. The low alcohol content and high caloric value of the beer provided the energy needed to build the massive ziggurats, the stepped pyramids that reached toward the heavens. Without the systematic production and distribution of beer, the monumental architecture that we still marvel at today might never have been built. It was the first energy drink of the working class, a vital component of the social contract between the rulers and the ruled. Beyond the dusty construction sites of the ziggurats, beer permeated every single layer of Mesopotamian society, acting as the invisible thread that stitched their culture together. To understand the magnitude of this, we have to look at beer not just as a beverage, but as a primary economic driver, essentially the liquid gold of the ancient world. In a time before minted coins or paper money, the economy of Sumer and later Babylon was built on a system of redistribution. Farmers gave their grain to the temple or the palace, and in return, they received sustenance. The most common form of that sustenance was beer. It was a stable, tradable commodity. Imagine a world where your monthly salary isn't a direct deposit into a bank account, but several dozen gallons of fermented barley. This created a standardized value system. If you wanted to trade for a goat or a piece of fine linen, you might negotiate its price in silers of beer. But the economic power of beer was only half the story. Its social role was perhaps even more profound. In the ancient Near East, the tavern or the times beat, Akiti times, was the heartbeat of the community. Interestingly, these early pubs were almost exclusively managed by women, known as times sabitu. These women were influential figures, serving as part brewers, part business owners, and part confidants. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest and most complete legal codes in history, actually contains specific laws governing these taverns. For instance, if a tavern keeper watered down the beer or overcharged her customers, the penalty was nothing short of being thrown into the river. This tells us 2 things. First, that the quality of beer was a matter of state importance, and second, that the government took the protection of the working man's drink very seriously. Have you ever wondered why we clink glasses or share a drink to seal a deal? That tradition finds its roots here. In Mesopotamia, sharing beer from a communal jar using long straws was a sign of trust and friendship. Since the beer was unfiltered and often thick with floating husks or sediment, the straw made of reed for the poor and gold or lapis lazuli for the elite was a technological necessity. Drinking together meant you weren't carrying a weapon. It meant you were part of the same bread and beer circle. Even in the Times Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest piece of literature, beer is the catalyst for civilization itself. The wild man Enkidu, who lived among animals, only becomes human and civilized after a priestess teaches him to eat bread and drink 7 jugs of beer. After drinking, the text says his soul felt free and happy, his face glowed, and he washed himself to enter the world of men. To the Mesopotamians, beer was literally the dividing line between being a beast and being a civilized human being. Religion, too, was intoxicated by the presence of beer. It wasn't just a drink for the living, it was a drink for the gods. Every day, elaborate libations were poured out in temples. The goddess Ninkasi, whom we discussed earlier, wasn't just a distant figure in the clouds. She was present in the bubbling of the fermentation vat. Priests believed that the joy felt after drinking was a divine touch. This leads us to a fascinating question. Why was beer so much more popular than water? The answer is a matter of life and death. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were prone to contamination from animal waste and runoff. However, the fermentation process involved boiling the water to make the beer bread, or times bapir, and the resulting alcohol and acidity killed off most harmful pathogens. In a very real sense, beer was the only thing keeping these large, dense urban populations healthy. It was the first safe drink in human history. As we look at the legacy of these ancient brewers, the comparison to our modern world is striking. While our beer today is clear, carbonated, and flavored with hops, an ingredient unknown to the Sumerians, the DNA of the industry remains the same. The Sumerians invented the recipe. They invented the brand. They even invented the happy hour. The transition from the thick, porridge-like ale of the ancients to the crisp lagers of today took thousands of years, primarily shifting in the Middle Ages when monks began adding hops as a preservative. Yet, the fundamental chemistry, the magic of yeast, turning sugar into alcohol, is the bridge that connects a modern craft brewery to a mud brick kitchen in 4000 BCE. One of the most incredible legacies of beer is one we often overlook: the invention of writing itself. The earliest cuneiform tablets found in Uruk aren't poems or chronicles of kings. They are administrative records. And what are they recording? Rations of grain and jars of beer. It is a compelling historical argument to say that humans didn't learn to write because they wanted to record history. They learned to write because they needed to keep track of their booze. The complex logistics of brewing on a massive scale required a system of accounting, which in turn birthed the first written language. Every time you send a text or write a grocery list, you are using a technology that was sparked, in part, by the need to manage beer production. So, the next time you hold a glass of your favorite brew, take a moment to look through the amber liquid. You aren't just holding a drink, you're holding the very substance that fueled the birth of cities, the creation of laws, and the invention of writing. Mesopotamia gave us the wheel and the plow, but it was beer that gave the people a reason to use them. It was the reward for the toil, the safety in the water, and the social glue that allowed thousands of strangers to live together in the world's first great civilizations. The story of beer is the story of us. It's a tale of innovation, community, and the eternal human desire to find joy in a simple bowl of grain. If you found this journey through the ancient vats of history fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden origins of the world we live in today. What do you think? Could you survive a month being paid entirely in beer, or would you miss your modern paycheck too much? Let us know in the comments below and tell us which ancient civilization we should explore next. Don't forget to check out our next video, where we'll be exploring how the Romans took the art of fermentation to a whole new level with the rise of the wine empire. Until then, stay curious, and as the ancients would say, to Ninkasi.